Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And I am only realizing now, just seeing myself on the screen, that I look like I'm about to go golfing and that I'm endorsed by Nike. I'm not, but Nike, if you want to stop in and, hook me up, maybe. I feel like maybe my brand could be just as valuable as Tiger Woods has been to Nike if I wear it. It just is what I wore to practice today. Long sleeves because it was kind of cool out there, and the hat did not help with, as you can see from my face, got a little bit of sun out there at the Vikings and Titans practice. But a good time, very intense, very intense. And it's such a switch from going from walkthroughs, 11 on 11s that were pretty light, to gas pedal down over the last 2 days, especially today. It was chippy, it was violent, it was physical. A couple guys got banged up. And overall, I thought that the Vikings had a pretty good day at practice. Very good on defense. The offense struggled through a lot of the practice, but then really showed up in the 2-minute drills, kind of evening it out a little bit at the end, because they led the first team, especially, an absolutely tremendous 2-minute drill with Kirk Cousins finding KJ Osborne a couple times and then throwing a touchdown to Osborne. There was a really nice Justin Jefferson catch. Jefferson in general put on a show over the last 2 days for a packed house at TCO Performance Center. And, at the beginning of the week, I called it moving week. And I think that that was the case for a lot of guys, that there were arguments made by a good number of players that either they could solidify where they're at, they could lose some ground, or they could gain some ground. And so we're going to go through those, of course, tonight, and also some of the different things that happened in the joint practice. And as always, take your comments, questions, whatever is on your mind about the Vikings going into the second preseason game. We'll also be doing another podcast with Will Raggets, previewing the preseason game and looking at what we're focusing on the most. But I think that some things have started to become clarified through the last few days. But I want to begin with just who was practicing and who was not practicing. It's kind of in the same list of guys who have not been out there. Once again, no TJ Hawkinson in full drills. Jalen Naylor, Kenny Nwangwu, Brian Asamoah, and Jordan Addison did not practice. Jaquelin Roy did do some stuff, so he looks like he's returning, but didn't do 11 on 11s, which makes me think that he probably will not play in the preseason game. Mekhi Blackmon's injury was the most notable of the day, where he got hit. It looked like Blackmon's arm hit somebody else as he was going to knock down a ball, and then he immediately grabbed for his shoulder or kind of chest area. Seemed like he was a little bit shook up, and they walked him over to the trainer table. He did not return to practice. And I saw that NFL Network's Tom Pelissero reported that Blackmon avoided serious injury. But my question is, what does that mean? What does it mean that he avoided serious injury? Because if I go through the list of players I just named, of all those guys that were not practicing, none of them are known to have serious injuries. And yet we haven't seen Jalen Naylor in a while. We haven't seen Kenny Nwangwu in quite some time. TJ Hawkinson has been doing warm-ups and nothing else for some time now. So not serious could mean, though, for somebody who is in that position, does that take them up to the beginning of the season? Does Mekhi Blackmon not have another opportunity to practice, or is he going to play on Saturday night? I'm not really sure what it means that someone does not have a serious injury, because we weren't given really a timeline in that report. And I'm sure it's hard for Tom as a reporter to pin down a timeline on a player. I think what he's just reporting is simply that it's not something that's going to end his season or maybe be out for a really long period of time. But when you are a rookie who is battling for a position, for a starting position, an injury like this can be quite the setback. I have really liked what I've seen from Mekhi Blackmon. I thought he did a good job in these 2 days. Well, he didn't get to do many 11 on 11s because he got hurt in 7 on 7. But on the first day, I thought he handled himself pretty well. And then on day 2 today, early on, he was doing a fine job. And then, now he doesn't get to practice anymore today, and then probably doesn't play Saturday night. Like, does this set him back? And then, now Jawan Williams will end up as the starter, or does that mean he's going to be in practice soon? I don't know. So that's something we're going to have to look into, and we'll see. But, Jawan Williams is the next man up. And Jawan is a guy who is a second round pick. I think he fits really well with what Brian Flores wants, which is super physical and strong and aggressive corners. He is very lengthy, very tall, and very strong for a cornerback. He looks much more like a safety. And that has been a good fit, I think, for Brian Flores' defense, for him still to be the next man up after Mekhi Blackmon. But he was initially starting out with that job and lost it to Blackmon, which, brings kind of the question, as somebody who had a lot of experience before, or at least had been in the league quite a bit before, for Jawan Williams losing his job to the rookie early in camp. Like, were they that happy with what they saw? It's not ideal. You would much rather have Mekhi Blackmon at 100% and starting, and now he's got a bit of a setback here. We'll find out how much it is. And Jim asked, what did he hurt? I'm not 100% sure. When he hit his arm on somebody, he was holding his kind of collarbone, shoulder, pec area, but there's a lot in that area that could get injured. So I don't want to say exactly what it was. But I mean, Jawan Williams is a good story if he gets an opportunity to start, because he's a guy that got injured last year, didn't play at all, was sort of coming along in New England, and it had his highest snap count in 2021, but then had that injury as he was battling for a job, and ultimately did not play last season. So now he's kind of trying to keep his career alive. He's a guy who's making $1 million to be here, as just barely in the league. So is he going to be able to, take some of this practice time, prove that he deserves to be on the 53, which I think he solidly is at this moment. But if there was any debate, he might have an opportunity in practice to step up. But if Blackmon is out for any amount of time, it might be Jawan Williams who ends up the starting cornerback. There was also another scary moment with the other cornerback, Caleb Evans, who ran into his own guy. A little friendly fire there on a play at the end of practice where they ran into each other, him and Josh Metellus, and Evans was a little bit slow to get up. Yeah, Dustin, I just mentioned Pelissero's report, but avoiding major injury, what does that mean? Like, does that mean out? Okay, major is out for the season, out for 6 months, out for 3 weeks. Like, this is pretty relevant, because there's a season coming up and there's only so much more practice that he could get in. Like, if he had to miss the rest of training camp, does he still start week 1? Like, there's a lot more questions beyond just, okay, he's not out for the year, so it's not a torn pec that would keep him out for the whole season. But that doesn't mean he's going to start week 1, depending on how this ends up working out. So, but Caleb Evans ran into Josh Metellus, and everyone went, oh no, including Kevin O'Connell, who came sprinting on the field to take a Caleb Evans off the field after he ran into kind of a helmet to helmet type of thing with Josh Metellus, or helmet to shoulder pad, whatever it was. It made a loud sound, and Evans went down. Based on his history from last year, again, pretty concerning. And the thing that you're walking out of TCO Performance Center thinking about, and Evans has tweeted out that he's okay, there's no issue, but this is a guy who had several concussions last year, and it's a major concern. And this was just a totally random thing. Nothing he was doing wrong, but just going for a ball and ran into his teammate. It's just, you start to think about the depth at the cornerback position. Now, Andrew Booth Jr., we can get to him, had an interception today, and as if things weren't chippy enough, decided it was a good idea to throw the football at the Titans after intercepting the pass. I don't think that the coaching staff was all that happy with Andrew Booth Jr. for doing that. It was trying to incite a riot, was really what it seemed like, that type of move, but also from a guy that has not exactly gotten the same gold stars as we've seen from the coaching staff from other guys, and not really a smart play. I'm not trying to make too much of it, and I laughed when he did it, but I also thought, what are we doing here? I mean, their main goal was to avoid any nonsense, and a Titans defensive tackle got thrown out of practice anyway. So already it was very tense. There was a lot of trash talking. Jeffrey Simmons, even when he wasn't on the field, was yelling at the Vikings players through the entire thing. Certainly a battle on the offensive line. I thought the offensive line had a tougher day today. Maybe they didn't think so. I don't know. Some of the quotes seemed like that came out of there seemed like they felt pretty happy with what they did. I thought that it was a little bit more of a tough day for the line. It's not going to be perfect if they face guys who are as good as Jeffrey Simmons, and I think we know that already. But what they have here is a 2-day sample size of their first team offensive line versus a very good starting defensive line, and they can decide how the performance went and whether they want to stick with this offensive line group or bring in somebody else to challenge anyone. And they've only got a couple weeks left to do it. So if they're going to do it, it's going to happen soon. And if they're not, then this is your offensive line, and they're rolling into the season with these guys. But they got a lot of those reps against Jeffrey Simmons, one of the best players in the league, and he beat them up a few times. But I thought overall it was okay. So, we'll see what they decide to do after this. But they get to go back and look at the tape, and I don't. So it would be easier if I could, tape the whole practice with a drone from right over top and then go back. It was my perception that today the offense was having more trouble in most of the 11-on-11 drills, in part because a lot of plays were getting blown up. But I'm trying to look back and forth between offense and defense, and I was noticing quite a bit on the defensive side how well the Vikings were doing, especially Danielle Hunter was mauling people, not surprising. But who was actually playing quite well today, I thought, was DJ Wanham. So they were using a lot of this package where they have DJ Wanham and Danielle Hunter on the outsides, Marcus Davenport on the inside. So you got 3 pass rushers and Harrison Phillips. That was their first team defense against Tennessee. And they were they were attacking the quarterback today from the edges and got a lot of pressure on the quarterback. But DJ Wanham looked really good on a few reps to me. And I don't know. It's hard to say, will he make another step or whatever? But I do think that in comparison to having DJ Wanham put a hand in the dirt, having him as an outside linebacker, that really fits better with who he is. So maybe there is a Brian Flores effect. What we know about players from the past may change based on how Brian Flores uses them. And that goes for someone like Josh Metellus, who got a ton of reps, almost every rep on defense with the first team. Josh Metellus was out there. They used a ton of 3 safety stuff, as him as kind of a hybrid linebacker situation. Ivan Pace got a ton of work again and had another, I thought, very, very good day. So I kind of was gravitating toward the defense because it was doing better, and the offense struggled until their situational drill. But they'll know. After this, they'll know. I'm not sure what they're going to do after this, but they will have their sample size, and they will know. So, but it did, to circle back to the Andrew Booth Jr. point. So he intercepts the ball. He throws it, at the Titans, whatever. They get everybody calmed down. They finish the practice. Nobody got clocked. There were no fights, whatever. It all worked out fine. It was a very good and physical practice between both sides. But I don't think that they are feeling very confident about Andrew Booth Jr. And, he's out there amongst the most talkative and so forth, but not exactly a top performer in training camp. And every time anybody asks about him, the answers are very muted, like, well, coming along, and didn't have this great of a practice, but he's coming along, whatever. Brian Flores said something like, he got beat a couple times against Seattle, but you learn from those or whatever. It just doesn't feel like there's much momentum for him. But if there are injuries you walk out saying there's not a whole lot of depth here. And the funny thing was, we got back to the media room after practice, and somebody said, hey, Ron Darby signed. And I was like, oh, like already with the Vikings? No, with someone else. So there's a cornerback. He goes to the Ravens, who is off the list of potential players that they could bring in if they need an additional corner. But I really wonder after this how they feel about their cornerback depth. I didn't think that Andrew Booth Jr. had some sort of horrible couple of days. Just the accumulation does not seem like the coaching staff is all that thrilled. To the question earlier, little sunburned. Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, it looks like it. Little red in the cheeks there. Yeah, it was very sunny out there, but also very windy. And I don't know if that affects my sunburn or not, but I did put on sunscreen, but look at me, right? Or maybe it's the better lighting. Also could be the better lighting, but probably not. I didn't get it only right here because of the hat that I've had on all day. It's not, Shane, it's not. Why is it a big deal? It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal that Andrew Booth Jr. threw the ball at the other team. But the problem is that that's not what the coaching staff wanted him to do. The coaching staff, both coaching staffs, it was vital to these practices that they not get into fights. They really did not want them to get into fights. And anything that ever started to get heated, they ran on the field and they got the refs involved. They wanted nothing to do with that. That's how people get hurt. And I totally agree with their stance on that. So when you tell your players as the coach, trash talking is fine, but don't do anything to incite anything. In fact, the player who got kicked out, he barely threw a punch. It was kind of like a pawing more than a punch. And he got kicked out of practice. That's how serious they were being about this. And so to throw the ball at the team when you've gone through this entire practice with no issues overall, other than one guy taking a swing, it just, it's not what you want. It's not what you want as a coach, is going completely against what the coaching staff wanted. So, and yeah, if it was a real game, that would be a penalty. But I imagine it was just because the tensions rose. You also want players to keep their composure. So it's not a huge deal. It's somebody who already can't afford to make any more coaches upset with him. How was Lewis Cine? I think that Lewis Cine had two very interesting days of playing in a position that we haven't really seen him play before, which stuck out to me quite a bit. Him and Jay Ward playing together, and Jay Ward getting to the second team, and him rushing the passer a lot more than I've seen him rush the passer. That was very notable. And sometimes it's hard to say how successful he was rushing the passer because they can't actually sack him. But you see his size, and when he gets up to the box in the line of scrimmage, I mean, he is big and he is fast. And I think that putting him in the box is kind of an intriguing idea. And they did it yesterday and they did it again today. And we might continue to see that. And Brian Flores, of course, he's saying, we're going to use 3 safety stuff. He said 4 safety at some point. I was like, I don't think you're actually going to play 4 safeties, but he did mention that. But they were loading up with a lot of players at the line of scrimmage. And for the first time that I can remember, Lewis Cine was up there over and over and over rushing after the quarterback. So that did stick out over these 2 days as something that was different. Are Andrew Booth Jr. and Lewis Cine in jeopardy for the 53? No, I don't think so. I think with those guys, you give them, especially Lewis Cine is not. I mean, that's your first round pick. That's a guy that you're going to try anything and everything to make work because you know what the talent is. And Andrew Booth Jr., you just don't have a lot of depth. There really isn't. You can't just cut him and play like Kalen Barnes or Tay Gowan. You just can't. There's not enough bodies. You need to kind of bet on that talent that Andrew Booth Jr. has. And at least the fact that he has been in the system and knows it, if you're cutting him, you'd be putting in somebody who's very, very inexperienced and doesn't even have the pedigree. Same sort of deal, though. You're trying to give it as much time as you can with players like that. And it would not be the first guy who struggled in his first couple of years and then had it click if it did eventually for Andrew Booth Jr. So they're going to stick with those guys and probably have them both play special teams to start and then see where that goes. Shane says trash talking isn't inciting. It most certainly is not. No, it is not. No, it's not. I also saw the play. I was standing right there. So anyway, yeah, you can't be serious, right? Like catching an interception and whipping the ball at the other team is an obvious, like, something that's going to send it over the top. And if you're saying that no one looked mad, then why were the Titans on the field? What? Okay. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm sure you saw something on Twitter, and that's how it goes. Was McBride and Chandler out there today? Yeah, they were. So that's another thing that's worth pointing out is, well, Kene Nwangwu did not practice at all in this, and I just, I don't know. It's not looking great for him. They did bring in another running back, but not a veteran running back. Somebody who has returned kicks in college. I'm not sure if that is at all if that's at all a factor in any way, that this player that they brought in is return kicks, but it more connects to the fact that they cut the kicker, Jack Podlesny. So we went into this and wondered if there would be a kicking competition, and there's not. I never thought there was, but there's not. There's really, really not a kicking competition. And I don't know why Jack Podlesny was around if there was never a kicking competition. Why not just cut him out of minicamp and then just move on with your life? But they kept Jack Podlesny here. He kicked a handful of times, and now we hardly knew ye, Jack Podlesny, and best of luck to him. But they cut him for another running back that they signed. I don't know. Odd move. I mean, Greg Joseph has had an okay offseason from the kicks that we've gotten to see, but is a questionable kicker overall. Missed a lot of kicks last year, missed a lot of extra points last year. I don't really understand why they have not brought in another kicker to legitimately compete, because clearly Podlesny never did. But here is the disappointing thing. Here is the thing that I'm pretty broke up about, got to tell you, going into Saturday, because, if I'm making those notes, what to look for on Saturday, can't put this out there. Matt Daniels for the second straight year. It's like the kiss of death. Last year, he said there was going to be a punt off between Jordan Berry and Ryan Wright, and there was no punt off. And then this year, he says Jack Podlesny's going to kick, and they cut him. No kicking competition, no punting competition. I've been saying how impressed I am with Matt Daniels. Keeps messing with me, though. No, I'm just kidding. I'm still impressed with Matt Daniels, but I'm sure it was a situation where they just had to say to Matt Daniels, all right, make your call on the kicker today. We need this other player. So some of you guys are funny. Like, the first thing I said about Andrew Booth Jr. and throwing the ball is that I laughed at it and it didn't turn out to be a big deal. And now you're telling me to get over it. I don't know. The whole point is just that if you're already in bad standing with the coaches, then you don't really want to do something that they specifically told you not to do. So that's just a thought when it comes to that. The Vikings draft strategy seems to have moved to lighter, faster, but more fragile. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that like Lewis Cine was lighter. He's pretty thick and big, and he is tall, but and fast. He's kind of everything as a physical specimen. I'm not sure like who's an example of that. Brian Asamoah is undersized for a linebacker. I don't think that that's a strategy specifically. I think that that's just how the cookie is crumbled with some players, that when you draft someone in the second round that, like Andrew Booth Jr., he might have some injury issues, but I don't know. Like Jordan Addison, the guy's a first round prospect, but all the wide receivers were undersized. And I mean, if you're going to draft any of them except for Quentin Johnston, you could have had the same takeaway. Like, well, this guy, if you're drafting Zay Flower, well, this guy is undersized. If you were drafting, who was the guy? I'm out of draft season work, but guy out of Cincinnati, and then there was the Tank Dell guy. Like, so there were a lot of them. Asamoah, Blackmon, Addison. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're drafting, what have they drafted? 20 players. I mean, some of them, I guess, have been undersized. And I think specifically they don't mind undersized linebackers because those guys, they want to focus on coverage. And that's why I think they've built a defensive line to try to stop the run on the interior and had undersized linebackers that they're okay with. I don't know. Was Blackmon like majorly undersized? I don't remember, or just looks undersized as an outside corner? Because I think he was kind of pegged as more of a nickel corner. But size wise, let's see. No, yeah, you're right. 178 pounds. Yeah. But I don't think that didn't have anything to do with his injury. I mean, he just hit his arm funny. It wasn't. Blackmon is a very physical player. Yeah, I know Smith-Njigba is good size, but you know the point. You guys struggling a little bit tonight. You know the point. There was about 7 wide receivers that were talked about this year as, hey, this guy's interesting, but he's undersized. The whole receiving class was like that. They also couldn't have drafted Smith-Njigba because he was taken. Anyway, let's see. Let's get back to some sense here in this world and talk more about the kicking competition. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know I just don't know why they had Jack Podlesny here. That's what I don't understand. Why bring him in if he was never going to be a part of this? And I just think that there should have been someone who is a veteran player who has kicked before in the league that should have been that person. Right now, who are you keeping at wide receiver? There is a good question, Shane. So here's another part of my notes from practice today. At the end of practice, Tristan Jackson came through with just a great route and a touchdown to finish the second team 2-minute drill. But throughout practice, he was mixing in and out with Jalen Reagor with the first team, and Brandon Powell was not working with the first team as he was yesterday in replacement for Jordan Addison. So we saw Tristan Jackson make a number of catches the first day, did it again today with a couple of plays, including a game-winning drive or whatever they're trying to simulate there, but the touchdown at the end from Nick Mullins. And he just continues to rise on the depth chart and to rise to the challenge and make plays every day. And I talked to him after practice today, and he said that after he had the injury, kind of felt like it was a second life for him. And just not that he wasn't motivated before, but kind of this, all right, like this is my big chance. I got a second opportunity after, not having a serious injury. He thought that he had gotten very seriously injured, but to be able to come back from that, and that, he's got this chance, and he made the most out of it in these 2 days. So the wide receiver room right now is, of course, the starting 3, Jefferson, Osborne, Jordan Addison. But the fact that Jalen Nailor has not practiced at all, and somebody else, Tristan Jackson, has come in and played day after day and done nothing but make plays, that complicates things. And if you're out for the entire summer, it's really hard to say, all right, guy who missed the entire summer, and look, there's nothing you could do, but guy who was on the fringe and missed the entire summer, you're in. But guy who made plays all summer long, including in joint practices, you're out. That would be kind of odd to me. And I don't know, maybe someone would pick up Jalen Nailor if the Vikings released him and decided to have Tristan Jackson on the roster. For me, it would be Tristan Jackson and then Jalen Reagor would be the wide receiver room behind obviously the first 3, because I think that Jackson can do what they need him to do. He can run the routes. He can run the roles of the slot receiver or the outside receiver. And most importantly, if you throw him the football, he's going to catch it. And the guy just tracks the ball well. And Reagor would be the punt returner / every once in a while he's in there. But today, just evidence of why Jalen Reagor never made it the same way that other first rounders have, like Justin Jefferson. There was a deep ball that Kirk Cousins threw that was immaculate. It was a perfect pass. He had outrun his cornerback and he reached out, and maybe he would tell me, hey, it was too far, but he didn't track it quite right, and it went over his head, and he couldn't quite get it with his outstretched arms. Like, that's it right there from Jalen Reagor. He can do the underneath stuff. They can get him the ball, but I don't think you want him as wide receiver 4. Maybe they could keep Tank Dell, or I'm sorry, I'm reading Tank Dell. Sorry. They could keep it'd be nice if they had Tank Dell as well. I've heard he's done well. he was undersized. And yes, you guys are confirming that Tank Dell and other receivers were undersized. Was it Scott? The guy from Cincinnati was another one people were talking about. I don't know where he went. Anyway, not to get too far off track, but they could keep Naylor and Jackson and Rager and have 6. I don't know if they're going to have 6 or not. Someone asked about Theo Jackson. Sorry, I may have scrolled down too far, and I can't remember who asked that. But I think Theo Jackson has done a really, really nice job and is a guy that you would really like to be on the practice squad. I think that is somebody who has shown that he knows what he's doing and is going to work hard on special teams. But when you already have probably 5 guys at safety that you want, it's really hard to keep 6. 6 safeties is a lot of players. That would be pretty tough to keep. But also, I think Theo Jackson's a guy you can get to your practice squad. And now that you can have these veteran players on your practice squad, it makes things so much easier. Let's see. From Andre, N'Keal Harris may make the team, making plays in a first rounder. Front office seems to be into those guys. N'Keal Harry, I think, is similar to Theo Jackson in that, yes, he's made plays, but he's been with the second and third teams the entire time. And I look at him as much more of a guy that they might keep around on the practice squad just for depth, but he has definitely not outperformed Tristan Jackson, who's been here for the entire time, been with them last year, and knows the offense extremely well, and then has done nothing but make plays. And then you could say, well, all right, give Harry the job instead of Jalen Rager, but Jalen Rager is their punt returner, and that is going to be valuable to them. I don't know how valuable that is to me, but punt returner is one of those things where if you have it, then you feel fine and you go, oh, anybody could be the punt returner. What's the problem? But if you don't have it, it's miserable and terrible, and your guy fumbles, and right? It's just, it becomes a huge problem. Jackson is number 9. Yes. Yep. He has gotten a ton of looks on the Vikings video recaps because he makes a ton of really nice catches. That's the thing. And I know this for a fact because it was said to me by Keenan McCardle in an interview we had when we sat down, maybe in May or something like that, where he told me that ball tracking was the thing. Ball tracking is what he looks for most. When the ball is in the air, can you make a play on it? And that's been Tristan. So if he doesn't make the team after the practices that he's had and the balls that he's tracked down, that would be a shame because I think he's done nothing to earn it. Josh Downs. Yes, that's another guy. I wasn't crazy to think that this draft class was pretty small outside of a couple guys. Wouldn't it be from JP? Wouldn't it be smart to use Rager as more of a gadget player, using him in the backfield, etc.? I think on occasion, yes, because he is an exceptional athlete. He is extremely fast and extremely athletic and pretty shifty and could also run through people. I don't know if there is a Cordero Patterson comp there, but maybe. And I guess I'd be willing to find out. I mean, the one thing you can't, he doesn't know how to pass block because he's never pass blocked in his life. So that would be hard as a transition. And maybe the reason that the Vikings never wanted to use Patterson like that, but they should have used him as a gadget player, like you're saying. How about 2 or 3 players, that kind of thing, not players, plays per game for a player like him, where he runs an end around, he gets his screen, whatever, get the ball in his hands occasionally. And I think it's a good idea. I thought it was a good idea for Kene Nwangwu last year, but that never really came to fruition. It might just not be something Kevin O'Connell's all that comfortable with as a player who can do that. My friend Judd Zulgad, Luke says, is all over Powell taking a spot, and maybe Rager or Nwangwu gets cut. So today was a good day to figure out where people stand. And Jalen Rager was taking all of the first team reps with Jackson, mixing in and out, that Jordan Addison would normally have. To me, that says that Jalen Rager is ahead of Brandon Powell, who is exclusively on the second team. I think Powell has been fine, and they would know who's doing better as far as the punt returning competition because it's super hard to tell. They don't really even return the punts. They just kind of field them and then run, but no one can tackle them, so we don't know how well they did. And Rager was also the first punt returner back when they did the preseason game, that would suggest to me he's ahead. It doesn't guarantee it. It just, I think that it looks that way from the way that they're using them rep wise. It could also be that they want to get him as many opportunities having been traded for, just give him his fair shake. I think that happens too between coaching staffs and front office, where it's like, hey, it's your call whether to cut the guy, but let's get him the fair shake and so forth. This is probably true. Digit says, I don't think Gadget earns a roster spot without more role value. Yeah, I tend to agree with you, but I also think that with Jalen Reagor having been in the offense for now last year and this year, they probably feel comfortable that he knows what he's doing in the offense. And he hasn't looked like it's been a problem to know what routes he's supposed to be running. It's just getting open and catching the ball when it goes downfield is really the Jalen Reagor issue. Philadelphia started throwing it underneath to him his final year there, and I think that's really the only option with him. But I think Rager's been around long enough where he knows where he's supposed to be and what he's supposed to do, but he's just never going to be a really exceptional wide receiver like his draft status. But if this was not a guy who had been drafted high, we'd be looking at it like, okay, he's a fine depth wide receiver, but mostly a punt returner. And Matt Daniels is going to get his guy on that. He's going to pick which guy he thinks is better, and they're going to keep him. It just looks like Reagor is ahead. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't pretty when they tried to use him as a receiver last year, except for that one play that Kirk randomly threw downfield and he caught it. From JP, are we moving away from the illusion of complexity that KOC talked about last year, considering we're going to use more 12 personnel? No, I mean, 12 personnel, that's illusion of complexity too, because now I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, because when you're talking about illusion of complexity, I think it was used in reference to 11 personnel, which is just the 3 wide receiver sets. And so you're like, okay, we're going to run the same personnel all the time. And we're going to, right, like you said, give the illusion that we're doing a lot more difficult things because we are running a lot of the same stuff out of, or a lot of different stuff out of the same looks or something like that, right? It's kind of a cliche. But to me, 12 personnel, which is when you got an extra tight end on the field, or 21 if you got a fullback and CJ Ham is out there. To me, that's where I think you can do a lot of stuff that looks like a lot of people are moving a lot of different ways, but it's really just play actions and bootlegs and things like that off of the run game. Because when you put Josh Oliver out there, the other team has to pay attention. They just have to. If it's Oliver and Hawkinson, the other team has to address that with personnel or with how many people they put in the box or something. And so you can make it look like there's a lot of misdirection going on and, end up with kind of a simple play action and hit a big play down the field. I think that it's all kind of part of it, but really more the way that I think they want to use that is just, well, one, to be successful in the run, to improve their play action, and to just be able to do something when they're ahead. I think that's what it really comes down to. So a lot of times last year, they would start a game, score a touchdown, 7-0, get the ball back, score another touchdown. Wow, Vikings are up right away in the beginning of the game. It gets, to the third quarter, they're up by 2 touchdowns, and then they can't, put it away. And they would leave the door open for other teams to come back on them. And I think what Kevin O'Connell went into the offseason saying was, how do I stop that from happening? How can I close out a 14-point game without relying on my defense to just make stops all the time? And one of the answers is you can run and play action. Because if you can run successfully, well, that's winding the clock, that's pounding the other team's face in. But also, you can hit big plays off of those play actions when teams are getting antsy about like trying to send a blitz or trying to get themselves back off the field, trying to take too much of a risk, or they just start jumping up at the run because they know they've got to get stops and they get over aggressive and then over the top, Gary Kubiak style. Gary came up today in conversation with Kirk Cousins. So he's still relevant here between these walls. Aaron says, any other rookies or second year guys that have stood out that you haven't mentioned? Let me think. Let's see. Well, we've definitely, let's see. Well, what is Kairos Tonga? Is he like a third-year guy? I feel like we haven't talked a lot about him, and they didn't play him a ton in these joint practices. It was more of a different personnel, but it's kind of stuck out to me that he's been getting a lot of first team reps. That's, yeah, maybe worth mentioning, but I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that we kind of haven't talked about. Did I mention Jay Ward? I think I mentioned Jay Ward just briefly, but Jay Ward getting a second team reps for the first time is quite notable. Now, that could be just because Josh Metellus was on with the first team so much with the personnel package that they used, but it could also be that Jay Ward is sort of next man up. And I have been curious about him to where he ends up on the field. He was talked about as being able to play a lot of different positions, corner, nickel, safety, and that's why they liked him. But he was playing a lot of just straight up safety over these last few days. So that's probably one that has been notable to me. Anthony says, I hope our screen game gets back on track and looks sharp this season. Should be fun with the athletic offensive line we have. That last year was just not good. And it's funny when you try to look back at the numbers because the screen numbers don't look horrible for Kirk Cousins, only based on 175 or 80 yard, it was 75-yard touchdown by Dalvin Cook on a screen pass. So that skewed the numbers if you get a big one like that. But they were play to play, not very good in the screen game. And it's almost like what Kevin O'Connell has to do is look back at 2019 and kind of bring some of that in, some of the screens, some of the play actions, because that was all they really did in 2019. It was run Dalvin Cook, play action, deep shots, and screens. That was the whole offense, 2019. Well, this is not how Kevin O'Connell plays. He plays with three wide receivers spread out, a tight end who can go down the field a little bit, is pretty fast, and they run dudes down the field out of the shotgun. Like, all right, we're playing more of a spread type of thing than maybe was even expected. That's the way he wants to play offense. But you need that other element of it where you're bringing everybody into the line of scrimmage and you got Josh Oliver out there just throwing bodies. And then you run a bootleg and Justin Jefferson's 30-yard down the field. Like, that still works in the NFL. It's worked for many years. Maybe I love it so much because it's like nostalgia for me. Like, yes, my childhood, the bootlegs, Gary Kubiak, John Elway, there it is. But I also think it's because I've seen it work like crazy here with the Vikings over the last few years, and they just didn't use it very often. I think that that's what they want to use it for. But the screens are just as big of a part of it. Anthony is exactly right. Those screens are a big part of what they should be trying to do to improve, because it was not very effective last year. So that's the thing about this offense, right? When you're trying to figure out, well, how good is it? There's clear areas where they can be better. And then there's clear question marks, which still the offensive line, I would say after this week, remains a question mark. I will be very interested to see if there are any changes there, but a clear question mark on the offensive line that will remain until they prove that it doesn't have to remain. I think it's like week 8, we can decide whether this worked out or not. I know that everyone wants to know how it's looking now. And I thought over these last 2 days that they survived and advanced, but it's really going to be, can you do it in the regular season for the offensive line? So there are these questions, but there's also these other places where I feel like, Kevin O'Connell had his first shot at it last year and got a lot of, Kirk punched in the mouth and the ribs a lot of times with his scheme. But I also think that he had an entire offseason to try to solve some of those issues. When you have tackles to the outside, how are you going to protect better on the inside? And somebody brought this up to, I forget, in one of these chats one night, and I was a little dismissive, and now I may have changed my mind about the idea of trying to get other people involved in the backfield to help on the interior. I've changed my mind. Whoever asked me that question, I've changed my mind. I think that they can. I think that they can use a CJ Ham, a Josh Oliver in motion or into the backfield, whatever they need to do in some more personnel packages, things like that, to help on the interior, because they're probably going to have to. And they have so much trust in their tackles that they'll probably have to. Just based on what I've seen a little bit in camp, I could see that. All right, from Luke, do we just have the best wide receivers coach in the league? Feels like every day there's too many plays from these guys. I don't know who to get excited about. Keenan McCardle knows what he's doing. Yeah, not all former players are good coaches. Keenan McCardle is a great coach. And here's how I know. Because, well, first of all, I've seen what you've seen. You get guys coming in here we don't even know, like Tristan Jackson, and then they just start making plays. And he made plays just like this last year in camp and was on the team, on the practice squad, but there was never an opportunity to use him. This year, there's been more injuries in the wide receiver, so he's gotten more opportunity. So there they found a guy. And that was a find actually during the Zimmer era, weirdly enough, that he was on the practice squad with the Zimmer era. So they've liked him for a while. And now all of a sudden he's developed and it's coming to fruition. He's making plays. We've seen KJ Osborne develop into a very good wide receiver. He's had a tremendous camp. Doesn't get talked about as much as Addison because Addison is more interesting. But Osborne has shown up in this training camp and been extremely good. When Keenan McCardle, got here, he had no catches, KJ Osborne. And now he's a guy who's in line to have a good season in a big role. Point just being, the answer is yes. They have a great wide receivers coach. But how I know is that when Mike Zimmer was fired, everybody else off the staff went with him, except for Keenan McCardle. And that probably means that Justin Jefferson really liked Keenan McCardle and Adam Thielen really liked him. But think about that. I mean, how often do you see that where a coaching staff is blown out? They all lose their jobs, but they wanted to keep him because he was so appreciated by the wide receivers. I think that says a lot. I mean, McCardle should get a chance to move up the ladder, to be an offensive coordinator, maybe a head coach someday. I don't know. But he has been very, very impressive and deserves credit. The league gave Nate Hackett credit for Aaron Rodgers at one point. Maybe you should give someone like Keenan McCardle credit for Justin Jefferson. How is Jaren Hall looking? Not a lot different. Not different to the point where I would say, oh, wow, he's taken a big step. It's a lot of drop back, not sure where to throw the ball and run. You've seen a lot of scrambling from him. He's just not seeing it and getting rid of the football. That's what we saw in the preseason game. And that kind of is what it is. When they were not practicing with pads, he was getting the ball out when they were doing 7-on-7s. But these gentlemen on the defensive lines of teams, they are big. They are extremely big. And here's my understanding about quarterbacks is if you're undersized, you're looking at flashes, you're looking at kind of where defenders are in spaces. You can't just scan the field and see everything and then make a throw. Maybe an underrated part of Tom Brady's game, I guess. Very tall, Peyton Manning, very tall, could see everything. But when you're his height, it's hard to see. And then when you lack his experience, it's even harder to see. He just needs time. He'll probably, I would guess that he ends up getting cut and ends up on the practice squad. That's just my guess for right now. But it hasn't looked like, wow, this guy's really getting it. It sort of looked like, oh, well, that's a rookie. That's what a rookie looks like. From JP, is Brian Flores going to send blitzes and play man, or there's going to be times where they just adjust to offenses we play? Yeah. I think boyfriend said that we do it, but I'd like to know if you think it's just talk. Well, your BF, or is that best friend? Either boyfriend or best friend. I'm not sure what is B. Would it need another F? BFF? I'm not sure. But to that point, he is going to send a lot of blitzes. Yes. I mean, a major part of this scheme is blitzing. I do think that sort of part of the Belichick theory, which is where he comes from, the Belichick theory of defensive football is different game plans on a weekly basis. There are some teams that say we play our scheme, that's how we play every week. And there are other teams that say we're going to scheme differently for every team. So I would guess that Flores is more along the lines of scheme differently for every team. But when I went back and looked at all of the games that his defense has played and how the opposing quarterback performed against blitzes, you know what I found? I found a lot of blitzes. You just see them on a daily basis, and they are sending a lot of people at the quarterback, and Ryan Tannehill was talking about it yesterday about how unique it is to see a team do it at that level of volume of send this many blitzes and be this aggressive. I also think that with this defensive group, you got a lot of inexperience, you got a lot of youth. It's hard to ask them to do a lot of complicated stuff with route combinations and so forth. It's a lot easier to send them at the quarterback and say, play man, send you at the quarterback. And then there are a lot of times too where it looks like they're going to blitz and then they drop back. So I think it's going to be a mix, but it's the central part of this thing is they're rushing different people from different places all the time. And so, but yes, I mean, they're going to scheme differently each week. So it might be 60% of snaps one week and 30% other weeks. So it will change from week to week, but it's going to be a lot of blitz. From Digits NT rotation with Tonga and who? No, it was not a rotation with Tonga. It was more of a personnel grouping. So instead of playing someone else in his spot, it was Marcus Davenport rushing from the inside, Wanham and Hunter from the outsides, and then Metellus playing that. I mean, we've called it the big nickel, but that's not really accurate. It's more of a hybrid linebacker thing where they have their nickel package, but he is in there as kind of an extra linebacker. I guess it's a bit, I guess it's a big nickel, but I feel like it's a weird big nickel with the way the defensive line is set up. So yeah, I mean, he would be in there with Byron Murphy, but we also saw a lot of Blackmon and a lot of Evans as well. So yeah, I mean, maybe I've just counted 12 people on the field, but the point was that they've got the personnel grouping that's going to be more on like third downs with Metellus up there, as opposed to on first down where you would have Dean Lowry, and then they got reps too, the base. But I felt like it was more of Metellus out there. I felt like I was seeing him out there all the time with the first team, and I saw a ton of Davenport rushing inside. So they may have just wanted to get a really extended look at that. But Tonga is decidedly the nose tackle, and then Harrison Phillips the 3 technique. I assume you mean, oh yeah, Josh Metellus. Josh Metellus has had the camp of his life, the dream camp. If he drew it up beforehand and said, what am I going to do in a camp? How would I do it in my dreams? It would look like this, except for running into a Caleb Evans today. It's the only, it's the only thing that we spotted that's gone wrong. He's carved out a role for himself. And that is something that has taken him several years of special teams, working his way up, and is also, in my mind, a testament to what we've seen from Brian Flores of finding players' talent and rolling with it and finding a way to use them. Anything on N'Keal Harry? Bog Trotter asks. Well, I think he's done as good as he could have asked for N'Keal Harry. It's a really tough situation to just show up and be like, okay, play wide receiver in a complicated offense. And of course, you're doing it with Jared Hall or Nick Mullins and not working with Kirk Cousins, who can help you out maybe as much as or more than those guys can. So, you know, I look at N'Keal Harry as he's done everything they could have asked him to do, and they will probably end up putting him on the practice squad if they like the way that he's gelled with this group. And that's really the best they can ask for. Will Levis, I did not see him practicing in a lot of the 11 on 11s. And T. Kubler says that he got hurt today. I wondered why I didn't see any more of him, and I saw way more Malik Willis. But I guess I just thought, well, I mean, because I wasn't following the Tennessee writers. I guess I was thinking they must just want to see more Malik Willis than they want to see Will Levis. When he was doing 7 on 7s, Will Levis, he has the fastest football for the shortest release that I think I've ever seen. His release is like here and the ball is gone. Like he doesn't even have to bring the ball down and it just goes. Is it accurate? Sometimes. Wasn't yesterday, was a little more today. And it looks to me like that's probably always going to be a problem, but the ball gets out there. And he made a couple nice throws in 7 on the 7s. Malik Willis had a tough day after I thought was a good day yesterday. And Malik Willis is another guy where both of them physically extremely impressive. Probably not drafted in the first round for a reason. If you are that big and that fast and throw a football that hard and you aren't a first rounder, that means you got a lot to work on. Does Dwayne McBride look like he's getting any better? That I don't know. It's hard to tell. I mean, if he's like getting better because they don't tackle them. So that's where it's hard with the running backs. But what the coaches are usually looking at is just how does it look for where they're supposed to be going. So are you supposed to be running that way and less than Brian Flores, not BFF or boyfriend. Okay, sorry, Brian Flores. Yeah, all right. Well, hey, but if you have a best friend, then hopefully they're talking football with you as well, right? Anyway, Dwayne McBride, but he's just not ready to play. That's been the way I've looked at it. Is Dwayne McBride's just not ready to play? He's probably getting cut and he's getting put on the practice squad, and that's where we're at. I mean, that's probably it. Like, yeah, you drafted a guy who had a great highlight reel, and we talked about that. But he was a seventh rounder and he was from UAB, and he's just going to have to develop some more if there's ever anything that's going to be there. But I'm not sure if right now it looks to me like they're just searching around for some other running backs to fill out that room. He might end up in the room just because they don't have numbers and just be, kind of down a little bit and play on special teams and so forth. I don't think it hasn't been a camp where he's all of a sudden got a ton of buzz and wow, here comes Dwayne McBride. We thought he could be the Mr. Mankato. That hasn't really come to fruition. So I'm not super high on what he's done so far. I think he's going to have a really great preseason game, and he's going to have to pass block correctly, as I keep mentioning, but it's a very important thing. So if both are healthy, has Blackmon overtaken Evans for cornerback too? Nice to see you, Matthew, by the way. No, I think it's still Evans that's still cornerback number 2. I've been very impressed with Blackmon. I think he's had a really good camp, but Evans has usually been out there, unless I missed something today. He's usually been out there when it's been Byron Murphy, and then it's usually been a Caleb Evans, and I think it's probably going to stay that way. David asks, is Danielle Hunter lining up or standing up or in a 3-point stance? He has been more standing up, and I don't think that it makes any difference with him. I've seen him rush off the edge, standing up. I've seen him rush for years with his hand in the dirt. I just think that he is great at football. I think one of the things early on, Mike Zimmer changed and got him standing up a little bit early in his career, and then hasn't really done it since then. And he was good at it then. He's just good at everything. He was a dominant human being today. It's something to see. I mean, I know we talked about, hey, if they trade him for a second round pick or whatever, this is not a guy you replace easily. I mean, I think that Tennessee went home pretty sad after facing Danielle Hunter for 2 days. He was doing a great job today. I was just more impressed because I expect that from him, with DJ Wanham getting after the quarterback too, and Marcus Davenport rushing from inside. All those guys were causing problems, and I'm really intrigued by the idea of Wanham getting more playing time and playing on the outside. He's been able to get to the quarterback a bit in his career, but not consistently create pressure. So, maybe we wrote him off, and maybe this is just hey, he had a good practice. I'm not sure, but it stuck out to me that they had him on the field a lot. Ron Darby signed with the Ravens. Blackmon and Evans hurt. Drake May inbound, I believe. Well, it's hard to say. So, the report is that it's not serious with Blackmon, but I don't know what not serious means. How not serious? Hey, can you give me a chart? We do charts. Can we give a meter of serious? Like red is serious. Orange is a couple months. That would be serious too. So maybe that's but red is season ending. Orange is months. We got maybe yellow is weeks. Right? Blue is days. Just maybe blink a few times if you could tell me how many weeks we're expecting for Blackmon is not serious. But anyway, it doesn't look like Evans is going to miss any time. But he also tweeted, by the way, I know some of you mentioned that he tweeted that he is okay after getting popped and running into Metellus. He also did that after he got his last concussion, that he tweeted out that he was okay. So players are probably the worst source you can ever go to for information. I'm not saying that he's injured, just that let's wait and see if there's anything that develops from that. We talk about precaution with injuries. That's a guy you really want to take as much precaution as you can. But to your point, Zeline, if they are without those guys, the cornerback depth is not good. This team will not end up in a position to take a top 3 quarterback. But could it be like 2020? I remember being asked this before training camp. Hey, could this go like 2020? And I don't know. Like, we'll see. Right now, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like Evans and Blackmon have been better than what we saw from like Holton Hill, Jeff Gladney, Cameron Dantzler. This looks better than that to me. And Byron Murphy is better than those guys as well. And so it's looked better. And I think it's been a good fit with Brian Flores for all 3 of them. If there are injuries in the cornerback group, it's going to be brutal. There's no way around it. It's just not going to be good. If there are injuries, that's the one area where the depth is pretty tough. Anthony says, what's your gut feeling on Kevin O'Connell really staying true on the offense to be more balanced this season? Oh, that's a good question. Trying to run the ball more. Is he going to really want to throw it all over the yard? That's a good question. Will he actually do it? So, well, this is the thing, right? Last year, he talked about how much he loves CJ Ham. Everyone loves CJ Ham. He's a fullback. He's great. But he said, oh, we've got lots of different ways to use CJ Ham. And they really didn't. They really didn't. I think that it was kind of like trying to try, as Bart Simpson said once, I'll try to try. And it didn't really work out with the way that they used CJ Ham last year, especially on a jet sweep. That didn't go well. But just overall, they used him less. It was inconsistent week to week. It just didn't seem like he really understood how to use the fullback in the offense. But they put a lot of money into Josh Oliver for a guy that maybe they're sure, maybe they're not about how he's going to be used. So they must have had a clear plan for how they want to use Josh Oliver in this offense to do the bigger personnel. Will they actually stick to the run? Depends on the run. I think he's going to be pass first all the time. I support that. Lean into the Kirk, lean into the passing game. That's always been the mantra on the show. They did not ever do that during Mike Zimmer's era, but Kevin O'Connell most certainly did last year. So it's always going to be pass first. But can you at least use the running game to make make a dent? That's the best way I could put it is you're going to live or die on the passing game in the NFL, period. But can you get to 2nd and 4 if you hand off on first down? If you get a short completion on 2nd down, you got 2nd and 3, can you get an easy first down by handing it off? Can the guy pass block in the backfield? Right? Like these simple things that are just moving the needle in a positive direction. And that I think they can do. And then it depends on the rest of just how successful it is, because anything that a coach succeeds with, they're going to stick with. Bog Trotter says any coach of the same ilk as Flores who could implement a similar defense when Flores leaves. I guess I would say let's just not get so far ahead of ourselves unless we're talking quarterbacks. Then we could get ahead of ourselves. But I'm not ready to hire the next defensive coordinator at the moment. I haven't thought about that. I do think that if they have a great defense, people are going to look more at Brian Flores. I also think when the NFL blackballs somebody, they blackball somebody. So I don't know if he's ever getting a head coaching job again. They will interview him, though, because his lawsuit is basically saying that you didn't give me a legitimate chance as a head coaching candidate. So they're going to give him interviews. But I think that if the Vikings want to keep him as the defensive coordinator, they probably will. Luke says, I feel like the entire NFL was very indifferent about Dalvin Cook until he was cut, and he's all of a sudden a superstar. He did great things here for a long time. But, yeah, I mean, I generally agree, Luke, that name recognition is always a big thing in NFL analysis at large. And for me, sometimes when you guys ask about like this place is talking about this and this is talking about that, NFL Network or ESPN or whatever, I kind of like don't catch a lot of it because I'm out at camp and whatever else. So I kind of miss some of that stuff on the networks of how they're talking about it. But what I did catch of the Dalvin Cook conversation was he was being treated when he was released as if they had just released the best player at their position in the NFL. And I think that what's great about the amount of information we have at our fingertips is that we can connect what we saw to proof of what we saw and say, what we saw was not the same guy. And here is the evidence that he was not the same guy. Does that mean he won't help the Jets? He might help the Jets. He probably will. He's a good player still, I think. But is it the game changer that he was a couple years ago? He was not that for the Vikings last year. So it would have to go a different direction. It would have to go back up, which usually does not happen for running backs. Bob says more pumped this year than last year, and they went 13-4. I don't know, Bob. If we had been doing a live stream last year at this time, I'm guessing you would have been pretty pumped. You're here at 9:00 watching this live stream. I'm guessing you're pretty pumped about football all the time. But you know what? Here's where I agree with you, Bob. This year, there's so many more questions to answer, and that's where my wheels get spinning. And that's where I feel like we've had a lot of fun on a nightly basis talking about this team. Is somebody like Ivan Pace Jr. That would have happened last year. Everybody had their jobs last year. Now we got questions abound still going into the second preseason game. So I'm excited too, as all of you should be. Rob says, do you think the front office will be calling around because of the thin defensive back room? This is the week to decide. And again, the severity, when we hear he avoided major injury, but we don't know the severity. If he's going to be out a month, then, maybe they do. And it depends on how they felt about this week, because Jawan Williams and Andrew Booth Jr. got a lot of reps this week against a pretty good team. I don't know if it's a great wide receiver group, but a pretty good team and a decent enough quarterback and a decent enough offensive mind in Tennessee. So there they are getting a lot of work, and they can decide whether they want to go out and look for someone else. Personally, I would have just signed Ron Darby. I know he's had some injury issues himself, but he's been around a while, and you're trying to win. And I don't know, like, he doesn't cost that much. That would have probably been my strategy. Maybe they've been bringing in people to say, hey, we'll sign somebody if you corners don't step it up, but I'd rather see them just sign some of these guys. Maybe they're trying to, hold out a little bit to give them as much opportunity as possible, and I respect that. But this is the time where it's either do the thing or don't. There are metaphors that can be used for that I can't say on the show, but do it or get off the pot. Like, stop bringing people in and sign somebody if that's what you're going to do. This is the time to do that. Corner would be on my list. Corner would be on my list for sure to sign someone after seeing what we saw and what it looks like if you have one person go down. Matthew says, do you think there will be any major lineup changes for Saturday's game? Pretty much the same. I would suspect pretty much the same. Obviously, Jordan Addison won't be out there. I would guess that Ivan Pace is going to get a lot of playing time, and they want to be sure about, if you're going to play an undrafted free agent, that's pretty bold. So you want to make sure there. I would guess he gets a lot of time. We could see some different corners just with the injuries. Are they going to keep a Caleb Evans out? I mean, certainly if he has any sort of bad feelings after his hit today, the collision, and maybe we're making too much of it, but anytime a Caleb Evans, somebody who's had this issue with concussions in the past, goes down, takes a hit, we're going to wonder, is he all right? Is he in good shape? Because those things do add up, and you worry about those. And if there's any concern, then he should not play. So that could be different. We could see a lot more backup cornerbacks, wide receivers. Tristan Jackson didn't get a chance to play in that last game. And so this is a big night for him on Saturday. He has done everything in practice to make this football team, but you got to catch the ball in the games as well. And I would guess he's going to get a lot of work. Can we start saying Mr. Egan? Never. No way. No, absolutely not. It will always and forever be Mr. Mankato. Always. Mr. Egan sounds terrible for one, but the other thing is too, it's the essence. It's not where we are. It's what we're talking about. We are talking about the guy who we'd never heard of, Ivan Pace Jr. I heard of him because they paid him a lot of money for UDFA, but I would have never guessed in a million years I would have had him on the practice squad. I don't know if I had him making the initial 53. Maybe I did, but I would have had him dead last on the depth chart. And then that guy comes into camp and he plays his butt off day after day after day. The coaches are talking about him. The fans are intrigued by him. And sometimes this guy is turned into Stephon Diggs. That's Mr. Mankato. That's not Mr. Egan. I don't know. Ugh, that sounds awful. So let's see. From Jake, how are they possibly going to decide on wide receivers? Most of them look great. Yeah, I mean, this could be where I think the hardest decision is Jalen Naylor, Tristan Jackson, and then Jalen Reagor and Brandon Powell. Well, I guess I said the hardest decision. Those are two decisions. Who is your punt returner? And which one of those younger wide receivers who you really like is going to stay? Now, you drafted Jalen Naylor, but it wasn't a high draft pick, and he's been injured. He hasn't been able to get out there. Could you cut him and get him on the practice squad? Or does someone else swoop in and say, come join our roster to Jalen Naylor if he's healthy? Could he go on IR to try to bury him a little bit and not have to make that decision anytime soon? I don't know. It is between those couple guys, it's a hard decision. Right now, I would have Jackson on the team and I would have Reagor as well, and probably Naylor and keep 6 wide receivers. That could be the answer. Shane says, so much we entrench ourselves with players. My question is, do we have the coaching staff to get the most out of our players to be Super Bowl contenders? I think that they might not have the roster to be Super Bowl contenders, but you could make a pretty good case for the coaching staff. I mean, Kevin O'Connell was an offensive coordinator on a team that won the Super Bowl, and then the next year won 13 games. And of course, we could say, well, it was luck, it was random, and you'd be right. At the same time, 13 goes on his record that he won, and I thought that the atmosphere created inside the building, the offensive philosophy on the whole, those things give you a chance. If you can have top 10 offenses, you've got a chance. Brian Flores, I think, is very, very much proven in this league. Yeah, I mean, I think they have a very good coaching staff. And certainly with an assistant like McCardle, creative special teams coordinator, like I think they have a good staff. And what we've seen from Kevin O'Connell as a head coach has been very, very good overall. I mean, think about this. If you're like, and I'll have my critiques throughout the season, no doubt. If they run another pass play to Kirk Cousins, I will throw one of these tables behind me. Okay. Make that a promise. Write that down. One of these tables is getting thrown if they throw a pass to Kirk Cousins. Don't ever do that again. But so there were critiques. Was he as aggressive on 4th downs as I thought he might be? I don't think he was. I thought at times managing the play calling and the head coaching duties was a lot. So there are things. Maybe you got to lay the hammer down on Ed Donatel and give Mike Pettin the defense last year and just make a change. So there are critiques. But think of like what a lot of coaches have done when they've first gotten their jobs and tanked franchises. I mean, how about Josh McDaniels last year? That team goes to the playoffs, falling off the face of the earth. And it's a very, very hard job that you don't know how hard it is until you got it. And to win 13 games, to have that locker room the way it was, to have the players sign on the dotted line that this is the best culture and the best situation for players in the NFL, that says a lot. So I think that stuff gives you a chance. And then you got to have a quarterback, and then you got to have a defense, and then you got to have some luck and all those things. So, a lot goes into it. Let's see. Spencer said, I tried to send this in by the website. It didn't work. So I'm asking here. Yeah. So the website works now. purpleinsider.com. I'm sorry for a little while it didn't. If you go to the contact us, you can send it in. Pick one of the following options. Any quarterback, 3 corners, 3 defensive linemen or offensive line, 3 wide receivers or 3 defensive backs. Which one of those options would you rather have out of a typical draft class? Well, do you mean like any quarterback as in like first round pick quarterback? Would I trade a first round pick quarterback for 3 corners or 3 receivers or something? The quarterback is the thing. That's where it's all going to go. The quarterback. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to walk over there because I forgot to plug in my computer. Hold on. Okay. I thought I had enough battery to keep going, but we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. I lost track of time because this has been a really fun chat. So I really appreciate really appreciate you guys. Let's see. From T. Kubler, will Pace play less in the next two preseason games to save him for the regular season? That's a good question. I'm interested in that as well. I don't know. But I think that if you're going to start an undrafted free agent, you want to get as much of a look at him as you can, as many possible reps to be sure. Like, all right, this is our guy. We want him to be our starter. But it's possible that he does play less if they've made that decision. And that's something I'll be looking for. If they play him like 2 series, take him out, that probably means that he is, I don't know if I could say locked up that job, but very close to locked up that job. If he's playing the whole night, it means we want to get a little more of a sample size. But the way they've talked about him is with such appreciation, like for his game, that it just looks to me like they're very happy with what they've seen. What about Bob says the fact that a UDFA has a legit chance to start on this team tells us all we need to know about the depth of the defense. I think that the cornerbacks starting having no experience whatsoever is probably the best evidence of that. But Ivan Pace Jr. has been legit, though. He's looked like a real player. And this happens sometimes where an undrafted free agent just plays great. I don't know that it's not like they're forced to put him in. Oh, we got nobody else. We're forced. They had somebody else, and he beat that guy, or at least so far, Brian Asamoah. They had a draft pick. And I don't think that it was that Asamoah was playing so terribly. I think that Ivan Pace has been that good. Doesn't mean I'm sure he's going to be a star. I don't know what he's going to be like anybody else, but from what I've seen, he's played like a veteran linebacker. If you just had me watch practice and said one of these guys is the undrafted free agent, I'd be like, the little corner, Mekhi Blackmon, it's probably who I'd guess. I don't know that I would guess Pace based on the way he's looked. But you're not wrong. I mean, when you look at the guys that they have on the defensive line, the accumulation of not very much pressure or sacks between them, you see someone like Dean Lowry, who the Packers let go. Like, yeah, I mean, it's very clear that they do have a lack of depth on this defense. But there are a bunch of other guys who have been drafted, guys who played in the league. The pace, he's beating out Troy Reeder, who's played in the league quite a bit. A third-round pick, a fourth-round pick in Troy Dye. I mean, he's out playing guys, not just a bunch of scrubs at that position. That's one where they have depth, I think. But it's the other position, especially the outside corners, I think, are where you would really say, wait a minute, there's no experience whatsoever between your two starting outside corners. But then again, they have like 5 safeties. So Duke to God, nice to see you, Duke. When you dive into the advanced stats, the interior line and run offense is always average, as well as the fewest attempts in the NFL. How have we not gotten worse with Cook absent? Well, it's because Cook didn't play that well last year. He just didn't. I mean, you saw it for one. It was not the same as it was before. His yards per carry was average, but it wasn't even really representative of a down to down, play to play. And we just have ways of quantifying these things to prove it. His PFF grade was like 25th in the league when he was at his best. So you could say, well, I don't know about that. But when he was at his best, he was top 3, top 5. And that we would agree with when it was good. And I think it was representative how he played last year. The rushing yards over expected gets brought out, but that's, I think, good evidence of what it looked like. Did he get the most out of what was there last year? I don't think that he did. And I think it can be better, even if it's less explosive, because it had so many negative plays. And when I've brought this up, the expected points added, that's just how you perform versus the situation. And his expected points added was just not good for a reason, because he had so many negative plays last year. So I think that even if they don't have as many explosives that they can be a better overall running game in totality than just, hey, Cook is more talented than Alexander Madison. Like, if it's not that simple, I think. Horse Feathers, good to see you. Do you think that Kevin O'Connell will play starters in game 3? No, I don't. I think if they're not playing in game 2, then that's probably it. And they've also got more joint practices. And so since they've got more joint practices next week, I would be very surprised. I think that now they're, instead of treating the third one like the old third one, I think they're treating the second one like the third one, but they're just never playing starters if you're Kevin O'Connell. And the third one is like the fourth one still, where it's just going to be a bunch of mostly complete backups. Stewart says, too bad Naylor is injured. I was really hoping a big step from this season, but can't make the 53 if you never practice. He was one of my big have to watch this guy during training camp guys. And it just never is. I mean, he's played one practice. That's really all that, it's ended up being, is just that one practice. What about Bob says, I'm saying that the missed picks over the years have left us with this kind of roster. No, you're not wrong about that. I mean, when you go back to the Spielman era and look, I did this once where I looked at every defensive player that they drafted over the years under the Spielman era, every single player that they drafted and how many starters they came up with. And I think Cam Bynum was like the only one. They're like legit starters who actually worked out and played for them. And Cam Bynum is, he's a guy. But that's all that they've came up with out of all these draft picks that they used. They just didn't hit on many on the defensive side. They also didn't draft. I mean, they drafted some corners high. Mike Hughes had injury problems. Jeff Gladney had his problems. Cam Dantzler, injuries, and then not being able to pick up the defense. I mean, geez, over the years, they just had a lot of bad luck or bad decisions in the draft. And you're absolutely right about that. That has put them behind. So now you're playing a lot of younger players. And that's where we're going to find out if those guys can play. But after today, I was looking at just this depth and going, ooh, like, I don't know. Is this depth going to be good enough? Love this question. This is a good question to end the night. How far could Christian Darrisaw throw one of us? It's hard for me to explain how much bigger Christian Darrisaw is than me. I am 6'1.5". I'm not giving myself a full 6'2", but with shoes on, I am 200 something. Depends on how much pizza I had that week. He could pick me up and throw me, I would say, about 12 yards. I think just because I've seen they pick up this ball. It's like a medicine ball and they heave it in the air. And last year I picked up one and threw it, or 2 years ago. I was like walking by Rashad Hill and I said, I could throw that higher than you. And he laughed and he said, go for it. So I picked it up. I tossed it up in the air and it went up there. And then he did it and it went way up there. So think about that as like your body. I'm going to put it at 12 yards. That, including my roll, he picks me up, he launches me, and I bounce. I'll go 12 yards. That's how far I think Christian Darrisaw could throw me. But he throws NFL players, so maybe farther. How many touchdowns will Kirk Cousins catch? Hopefully it's 0. Hopefully that never comes out ever again. Duke says, I agree that Dalvin isn't the same as 3 years ago, but had the highest stuff rate in the NFL. That means the defensive interior, we're living in the backfield. That's true. But I also think, we saw it, though. He got caught in the backfield a lot, where in years past he didn't. Like, stuff rate, are we putting that on the offensive line? I don't know. I'd have to go back and try to look, but a lot of times was last year the first bad offensive line? Also they graded pretty well as a run blocking offensive line. I think he just didn't have the jump anymore last year. Could come back, but Madison, I think, is a better choice to go with him and younger players. And if it doesn't work out, then you know that you don't have a starting running back. But I think that it's all secondary to set up the passing game, and it can't be understated that Madison is good in the passing game. All right. This is carried on for quite some time, but I do have something to tell you guys about that isn't just an ad read. And we're actually having an event. Let me see if I can call this up in the screen here to show you the thing that we made, the tweet. See if I can do this. But yeah, we're actually having an event in person in Minneapolis. So I'm hoping that some of you guys can come. Let me see if I got the share screen here. Okay, there it is. All right. Are we seeing this? Let me put this up there. This is okay. Yeah, here it is. There's my Twitter. And so it's at Inbound Brewing next Tuesday night, 6 to 9, naturally. But Inbound Brewing is an extremely cool place. And I'm really excited about this because Purple Insider started in the middle of COVID, and we just haven't been able to figure out a time and a place to do this. So 6 to 9 next Tuesday night, Inbound Brewing in downtown Minneapolis. They're going to have a food truck there. We're going to have I'm working on creating my own immaculate grid game based on the show. So that'll be really cool. And you could just show up if you want, but there's also a sign up sheet because we're going to have some prizes. We're going to pick names at random. So if you want to go to my tweet at Purple Insider or my Twitter at Matthew Coller, if you want to go there. And I can also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm still figuring out everything live stream wise. Can I just put this in the chat? Let me see. Does this work? Maybe not. Maybe it just looks like super not legit if I just put it in the chat. Well, let me know if that works. But Inbound Brewing, it's near Target Field. It's a really super cool place. Next Tuesday night, we're going to record the podcast live. So instead of just here in my very cool studio, it will be there. So there you go. And I'm excited. Hopefully we could see some of you there. That doesn't really look like that link worked, but I'm sorry for that. But you got the date and time. You wrote it down, right? Inbound Brewing, Tuesday night. So hopefully I see some of you there. I'll remind you each night that that's where we're going to be. But anyway, thanks so much, everybody, for watching. And we'll have a chat. We'll have a preview for the preseason game will be the next time that we talk. And then Saturday night after the game from inside US Bank Stadium. So you want to do a little football after dark. What happens is on game day, I go down to the locker room, talk to players, talk to Kevin O'Connell, come back up, set up, and we'll live stream from inside the stadium. And then we can talk then. So thanks everybody for watching as usual. And we will see you later. Football.